Mada's white scrubs are no longer white. The crimson bloom spreads across her shoulder like spilled wine on linen. Too fast, too much. She presses her palm against the wound, but the rain washes the blood between her fingers, pooling in the cracks of the sole pavement. Her ID badge catches a flash of red and blue light. Park Mata, Arand Trauma Unit. 3 shadows stand over her. Dark uniforms. Darker intentions. Should have stayed in your own country, nurse. One of them spits, his gun still raised. Mada's vision blurs. She tries to speak, to tell them they've made a mistake, that she saves lives, that she's nobody's target. But her breath comes in shallow gasps. The stethoscope around her neck feels like a noose. Her phone buzzes in her pocket. The screen cracks against the wet concrete, but she can still see the name, Lee White. She can't answer. Cut to a penthouse office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seoul skyline. Lee White doesn't drop his phone when he hears the gunshot through the line. He crushes it. The glass of whiskey in his other hand explodes against the window. Amber liquid streaking down like tears the city will never see him shed. His reflection stares back at him. Perfectly tailored charcoal suit, immaculate hair. A man who controls empires with a single phone call. But he can't control this. Hyung Nim. His lieutenant begins from the doorway. Lee's voice is a blade. Find them. Sir, we don't know who. I don't care if they're gods or ghosts. I don't care if they wear badges or crowns. Lee turns and his eyes are the kind of empty that swallows light. My wife was shot 30 seconds ago. In my city. On my streets. He straightens his tie with hands that don't shake. Because monsters don't tremble, they hunt. Bring me everyone who is within a mile of that corner. And tell the trauma unit at Siocho Medical that if my wife doesn't survive the next hour, neither do they. His lieutenant bows and disappears. Lee stands alone in his tower, watching the rain fall on a city that has no idea it's about to burn. Flashback title card. 6 months earlier. Scene. Mada didn't come to Seoul for love. She came for silence. Detroit had taken everything from her. 12-hour shifts in a war zone near gunshot victims who looked like her little brother. And a final night where she couldn't save a 6-year-old caught in crossfire. She handed in her scrubs, bought a one-way ticket, and chose the furthest place she could find on a map where they still needed trauma nurses. Seoul was supposed to be her fresh start. Clean, distant, safe. She didn't know that the most dangerous man in the city was bleeding out on a gurney in her ear. Scene, the night she met Lee White. Gunshot wound to the abdomen, entry and exit, he's crashing. Mada didn't flinch when 6 armed men in black suits tried to follow the gurney into her trauma bay. She pointed at the red line on the floor. Behind that line or I let him die. The men looked at each other. One reached for his weapon. The man on the gurney, barely conscious, blood soaking through his white dress shirt, raised one hand. A single gesture. The guard stepped back. Mada didn't ask his name. She didn't care about the tattoos she glimpsed when she cut his shirt away, or the way his eyes stayed locked on her face even as she dug for the bullet. She just saved him. When it was over, when his vitals stabilized and she finally exhaled, he spoke for the first time. What's your name? She wiped blood from her gloves. The nurse who just saved your life. I'm Lee White. I don't care who you are. You're just another patient. That was the moment he decided she was the only woman in the world who could ever stand beside him. That was the moment everything changed. Return to present. The rain-soaked street. Mada's eyes flutter closed. The sirens are getting louder, but she knows they're not coming for her. They're already here. The men who shot her are the sirens. Her last thought before the darkness swallows her. Lee's going to burn this city down. And across Seoul, in a tower made of glass and steel and blood money, Lee White is already making calls. The war has begun. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. Detroit taught Mata Park 3 truths. Bullets don't discriminate, trauma bays smell like copper and desperation, and some nights you lose more patience than you save. The last truth broke her. She'd worked the graveyard shift at Detroit Metro General for 6 years. Long enough to know the difference between a gunshot wound from a hunting accident and one from a 9mm fired at close range. Long enough to recognize the mothers who'd scream and the ones who'd go silent. Long enough to save hundreds of lives and watch dozens slip through her blood-slicked gloves. But the night 6-year-old Tommy Richardson died on her table, something inside Mata died too. He'd been caught in crossfire outside a corner store. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong city. She'd worked on him for 43 minutes. Chest compressions until her shoulders burned, intubation, transfusions, everything she had. But sometimes everything isn't enough. His mother's wail still echoed in Mata's skull 2 weeks later when she submitted her resignation. "You're the best trauma nurse we have," her supervisor said, pushing the paper back across the desk. "Take a leave of absence. Don't quit." "I'm done watching children die in a war zone," Mata replied, her voice flat. "I'm done." She didn't tell anyone she'd already bought the plane ticket. Didn't explain why she'd chosen Seoul, a city she'd never visited in a country whose language she barely spoke. She just knew she needed to be somewhere that felt like the opposite of Detroit. Somewhere clean and efficient and far enough away that the ghosts couldn't follow. The medical recruiter's email had been straightforward. Seocho Medical Center seeks experienced trauma nurses. Competitive salary, housing stipend, visa sponsorship available. Mata had replied within an hour. 3 weeks later, she landed at Incheon International Airport with 2 suitcases and a heart that felt like an empty holster. Seoul sprawled before her, neon and steel, mountains and modernity, a city that hummed with life instead of gunfire. She thought she'd found peace. She had no idea she'd found him. The trauma bay at Seocho Medical looked different from Detroit Metro. Cleaner, newer, with equipment that actually worked. But blood smelled the same in any language. "Gunshot wound incoming," the charge nurse shouted in Korean, and Mata's body moved before her brain translated. 4 months in Seoul had taught her the vocabulary that mattered. Hemorrhage, intubate, crash cart, code blue. She snapped on gloves and positioned herself at the head of the bay. 2 residents flanked her, already prepping IVs. The automatic doors burst open and a gurney exploded into the room, surrounded by 6 men in black suits who looked nothing like paramedics. The patient was tall, well-dressed despite the blood soaking through his white shirt, and conscious enough to track Mata's movements with dark, calculating eyes. "Gunshot to the abdomen," the lead resident said, cutting away the ruined shirt. "Entry wound lower left quadrant. No visible exit." "Back," one of the suited men barked in Korean, his hand moving toward the bulge under his jacket. Mata stepped directly into his line of sight. "You cross that red line, he dies. Your choice." The man's eyes narrowed. His 5 companions shifted, hands moving toward weapons that shouldn't exist in a hospital. "Stand down." The voice came from the gurney, low, strained, but absolutely commanding. The patient had raised one blood-slicked hand, palm out. A gesture. An order. The guards stopped. "Sit back." But their eyes never left Mata. She ignored them and focused on her patient. "What's your name?" "Does it matter?" His Korean was crisp despite the pain. "I need something to call you while I save your life." "Lee White." Mata's hands were already assessing the wound. Entry point clean, no arterial spray, but internal bleeding likely. Lee White, I'm Nurse Park. You're going to feel pressure. She worked with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Controlled the bleeding. Stabilized vitals. Directed the residents like an orchestra conductor. The whole time, Lee White's eyes never left her face. Even when she dug for bullet fragments. Even when his jaw clenched against pain he wouldn't voice. Even when his blood pressure dropped and the monitors screamed. 2 hours later he was in recovery. Stable. Alive. Mata stripped off her gloves and found the 6 guards waiting in the hallway like sentinels. He'll live, she said in Korean. But he stays in ICU for 48 hours. No arguments. The lead guard bowed. A gesture of respect that felt wrong coming from a man who'd almost drawn a gun in her trauma bay. Thank you, Nurse Park. She nodded and walked away, already mentally cataloging the next patient. She didn't think about Lee White's eyes tracking her like a predator studying prey. Didn't wonder why 6 armed men protected a patient in a public hospital. Didn't question the way he'd commanded their obedience with a single gesture. He should have. Lee White woke in the ICU with an 4 in his arm and a revelation in his chest. He'd been shot before. Stabbed twice. Survived a car bombing in Busan. Built an empire from his father's crumbling legacy through blood and calculated violence. He'd bought politicians, buried enemies, and commanded respect through fear. But he'd never met a woman who looked at him like he was just another patient. Nurse Park had treated him with clinical efficiency. No fear, no recognition, no deference. She'd ordered his guards back like she was dismissing children. She'd dug a bullet out of his abdomen without flinching. She hadn't even asked what he did for a living. Lee pressed the call button. A different nurse appeared, younger, nervous when she recognized him. Where is Nurse Park? He asked. Her shift ended, Mr. Lee. She'll be back tomorrow evening. What's her full name? The nurse hesitated. Lee didn't repeat himself. He never had to. Park Mata, the nurse whispered. She transferred from America 4 months ago. America. Lee filed that information away. Thank you. The nurse fled. Lee stared at the ceiling and felt something unfamiliar. Fascination. In his world, people either feared him or wanted something from him. Women especially, they saw his tailored suits, his penthouses, his power, and they came willingly, eagerly, transparently. But Mata Park had looked at him and seen a bleeding patient. Nothing more. Which meant she was either remarkably naive or dangerously fearless. Either way, Lee White wanted her. Over the next 2 days, he extracted information the way he always did, through careful observation and strategic questions. He learned she lived alone in a modest apartment in Gangnam. She worked night shifts, kept to herself, and had a reputation for being brilliant under pressure but cold everywhere else. The other nurses respected her but didn't know her. She had no social media, no boyfriend, no visible life outside the hospital. She was a ghost trying to disappear. Lee recognized the pattern. He'd seen it in soldiers with PTSD, in refugees, in people running from something that still chased them in dreams. Whatever Mata was escaping, it had teeth. When she came to check his vitals on the 3rd day, Lee was sitting up, already dressed in clothes his assistant had brought. The 4 was out. His wound was healing faster than it should. Money bought the best antibiotics, the best surgeons, the best everything. You're not discharged yet, Mata said, checking his chart without looking at him. I'm discharging myself. Against medical advice. She made a note. Your choice. Lee stood, testing his balance. Pain radiated from the wound, but he'd learned to ignore pain decades ago. Have dinner with me. Mata finally looked up. Her expression was utterly neutral. No. I'm asking, not ordering. And I'm declining, not considering. She handed him the discharge papers. You need to follow up in 1 week. Take the antibiotics for the full course. If you develop fever, chills, or increased pain, return immediately. She turned to leave. Nurse Park. Lee's voice stopped her at the door. Thank you for saving my life. She glanced back. For just a second, something flickered in her eyes. Maybe surprise that a man who commanded armed guards could say thank you. Maybe recognition that beneath the suits and power was just another patient who'd almost died. You're welcome, Mr. Lee. Then she was gone, and Lee was left standing in the ICU with a bullet wound that was already healing and an obsession that was just beginning. The roses arrived on Monday. Mata walked into the trauma ward for her shift and stopped dead. Every available surface, the nurse's station, the empty beds, the windowsills, even the floor, was covered in red roses. Hundreds of them. Thousands maybe. The entire ward looked like a garden had exploded inside a hospital. Someone has an admirer, the charge nurse said, grinning. The card says there for you. Mata plucked the small white card from the nearest bouquet. The handwriting was elegant, masculine. Dinner. Please. Lee White. She crumpled the card and tossed it in the trash. Then she spent the next hour coordinating with maintenance to remove enough roses that they could actually treat patients. The roses returned on Tuesday. Different arrangement, same volume, same message. Wednesday brought roses and a catered lunch for the entire trauma ward. Expensive sushi from a restaurant Mata couldn't pronounce, delivered with another card. If you won't have dinner with me, at least eat well. LW. Thursday's roses came with diamond earrings. Mata returned them. Friday brought a grand piano in the hospital lobby with a professional pianist playing for 4 hours straight. The card read, I heard you like music. I'm running out of ideas. Please have dinner with me. Lee White. Mata didn't like music particularly, he'd made that up, but she was impressed by the sheer audacity. On Saturday, she found Lee White himself sitting in the trauma bay waiting room, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary. This is harassment, she said. This is courtship, he replied. Though I admit my methods are unconventional. Your methods are insane. You're disrupting hospital operations. One dinner and I'll stop. You'll stop anyway or I'll file a restraining order. Lee smiled. A real smile, not the calculated expression she'd seen in the ICU. You could, but you haven't. Why? Mata hated that he was right. She could have reported him, could have banned him from the hospital, could have escalated this to security. But she hadn't. Because somewhere beneath her annoyance was curiosity. Because in 4 months of running from Detroit, she hadn't let herself feel anything. And Lee White's ridiculous roses made her feel something. One dinner, she said. Then you leave me alone. One dinner, Lee agreed. And if you have a terrible time, I promise you'll never see me again. The restaurant was small, intimate, and entirely empty except for them. You rented out the whole place? Mata asked as Lee pulled out her chair. I wanted privacy. Or you wanted control. That too. He didn't deny it. But mostly I wanted you to feel comfortable saying no to anything I suggest without an audience. Mata studied him across the table. In the soft lighting, Lee White looked less like a crime boss and more like a man trying very hard to impress someone who wouldn't be impressed. His suit was immaculate, his hair perfect, but his hands betrayed nervousness, fingers adjusting his water glass, smoothing his napkin. Why? She asked. Why dinner? Why me? Mata leaned forward. You're clearly wealthy, clearly powerful. You could have any woman in Seoul. So why chase a foreign nurse who wants nothing to do with you? Lee was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was honest in a way that felt dangerous. Because when you looked at me in that trauma bay, you saw a patient. Not my reputation. Not my money. Not my guards or my guns. Just a man who was bleeding and needed help. Do you know how rare that is? Maybe you should find better company. Maybe I just did. The dinner lasted 4 hours. They talked about everything except what Lee did for a living. He asked about Detroit, and Mata found herself describing the city she'd fled, the neighborhoods divided by invisible wars, the ER where she'd learned to recognize gang colors, the night Tommy Richardson died and something broke inside her. Lee listened without judgment, without pity, without trying to fix anything. He just listened. When she asked about his life, he was careful, selective. My father built something from nothing. When he died, people thought I was too young to hold it. They were wrong. What is it exactly? Import-export. The lie was smooth, but she caught the edges. Shipping, logistics, supply chain management. With armed guards. Korea is complicated. Mata laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. That's the worst deflection I've ever heard. Lee grinned. Would you prefer a good lie or a truth you're not ready for? I'd prefer honesty. Then honestly, I'm not a good man, Nurse Park. I've done things that would make you run back to Detroit. But I'm trying to be better. You make me want to be better. It was the most dangerous thing he could have said because Mata believed him. At the end of the night, Lee walked her to his car. A black sedan with tinted windows and a driver who definitely carried a weapon. Same time next week? Lee asked. I haven't decided yet. Then I'll send roses until you do. Mata smiled despite herself. You're insufferable. But charming. Occasionally. She turned to leave, then stopped. Lee. Whatever you're really involved in. People like me don't survive in people like you's worlds. We're liabilities. Targets. Collateral damage. Lee's expression shifted from playful to deadly serious. Anyone who tried to hurt you would learn very quickly that I protect what's mine. I'm not yours. Not yet. He opened the car door for her. But you will be. 2 weeks later, Mata received a call from hospital administration. The director wanted to see her immediately. She walked into his office expecting a reprimand. Maybe the roses had finally crossed a line. Maybe Lee's attention had caused political complications. Instead, the director gestured to a chair with a nervous smile. Nurse Park, I've reviewed your performance over the past 4 months. Your skills are exceptional. Your patient outcomes are the best in the trauma unit. We'd like to offer you a permanent position with a significant raise. Mata waited for the catch. Additionally, the director continued, clearing his throat, I've been asked to inform you that Siocho Medical Center is under new ownership as of last week. The new owner has taken a particular interest in our trauma program and wishes to ensure our best staff are properly compensated and retained. Ice slid down Mata's spine. Who's the new owner? The director looked uncomfortable. Lee Enterprises Incorporated. Mata stood so fast her chair scraped. You're joking. I assure you this is. She was already walking out, pulling her phone from her pocket, dialing the number Lee had given her. He answered on the first ring. You bought the hospital? Good morning to you too. She could hear the smile in his voice. Lee. You bought the hospital I work at. I bought a struggling medical center that needed investment. That you happen to work there is manipulation. Is fate. He paused. Mata, I didn't buy the hospital to control you. I bought it because it was a good investment and because I want you to have the best resources. But if it makes you uncomfortable, I'll sell it. Your job, your autonomy, your choices, they're yours. Always. Mata stood in the hospital parking lot, phone pressed to her ear, and realized she was at a crossroads. She could walk away, quit, move to another city, another country, keep running from everything including this. Or she could stop running. Dinner tonight, she said. Your place. And you're going to tell me the whole truth about what you really do. I'll send a car. I'll take a cab. Lee laughed. I really am in love with you. Mata hung up before he could hear her say, I know. Detective Raymond Park, no relation, watched through binoculars from a rooftop across from Lee White's penthouse. The foreign nurse had just entered the building. Third time this week. She's up, he said into his radio. Copy that. Detective James Gordon's voice crackled back. How long you want to watch this piece of shit parade his whore around? Raymond lowered the binoculars. He didn't like Gordon's language, didn't like his methods, didn't like the fact that Gordon's anti-corruption unit seemed to collect more bribes than arrests. But Raymond was a junior detective, and you didn't question senior officers if you wanted to keep your badge. Captain wants us to keep surveillance until they establish a pattern, Raymond said. Patterns established. Lee White screwing the nurse. Question is what we do about it. Raymond didn't answer. He'd been assigned to the Organized Crime Task Force 6 months ago, specifically to build a case against Lee White and his alleged criminal empire. But 6 months of surveillance had produced nothing actionable. Lee was too careful, too insulated, too smart to leave evidence. So Gordon's unit had shifted tactics. If they couldn't get Lee on his crimes, they'd pressure his associates, his suppliers, his accountants, his weaknesses. Apparently, Nurse Mata Park was being classified as a weakness. She's just a civilian, Raymond said. A nurse. She probably doesn't even know what he does. She's sleeping with a known criminal, Gordon replied. That makes her part of the problem. Maybe we pay her a visit. Remind her that foreign nationals can lose their work visas real easy. That's not. You got a problem, Detective Park? Raymond swallowed his objection. No, sir. But 2 nights later, when Gordon laid out the plan to send a message to Lee White by stopping his nurse girlfriend on a routine traffic stop and putting a scare into her, Raymond requested reassignment. His captain denied it. You're on this until we close it, the captain said. And Gordon's methods get results. Gordon's methods are going to get someone hurt. The captain's expression hardened. Lee White has corrupted half this city. He's untouchable because people are afraid. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. Raymond wanted to argue that fire just burned everything down. But he was 26, 2 years out of the academy, and nobody listened to junior detectives who questioned orders. So 3 nights after that, when Gordon and his 2 partners rolled up on Mata Park walking home from a late shift, Raymond was in the car. Watching. Silent. Complicit. The rain had started an hour earlier. That cold autumn rain that turned Seoul streets into black mirrors. Mata walked alone, umbrella up, white scrubs visible under her jacket. Gordon pulled the unmarked cruiser alongside her. Ma'am, we need to speak with you. Mata stopped. Is something wrong, officers? That depends. Gordon stepped out of the car, his partners flanking him. You know a Lee White? Raymond saw it then. The moment Mata's expression shifted from confusion to calculation. She knew exactly who Lee was. Which meant Gordon was right, which meant Raymond was part of something that was about to go very wrong. I'm a nurse at Cho Medical, Mata said carefully. I know many patients. This ain't about patients. Gordon stepped closer. Raymond noticed his hand resting on his service weapon. This is about you sleeping with a criminal and thinking there's no consequences. I don't know what you're. Shut up. Gordon's partner grabbed Mata's arm. You foreign nurses come here thinking you can do whatever you want, screw whoever you want. Time someone taught you about respect. That's when Raymond saw it. Gordon's hand moving to his gun. Not threatening. Drawing. Gordon, wait. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the rain-soaked street. Mata fell. Raymond's world stopped. He was out of the car, screaming, trying to understand what had just happened. Gordon was holstering his weapon. The other partner was already calling it in. Shots fired, suspect down. She's not a suspect. Raymond dropped to his knees beside Mata. Blood everywhere. So much blood. Her scrubs, white, always white, now crimson. Her eyes wide with shock. She reached for something, Gordon said calmly. I had no choice. She was unarmed. That's not how the report's going to read, Detective Park. You were here. You'll confirm she was resisting arrest. You'll confirm I felt threatened. You'll confirm this was justified. Won't you? Raymond looked at Mata bleeding on the pavement, at Gordon's cold eyes, at his own hands soaked in her blood as he tried to stop the bleeding. He knew three things with absolute certainty. Gordon had just executed an innocent woman. Raymond was now part of a cover-up. And Lee White was going to burn the entire police department to ash. Lee was reviewing shipping manifests when his phone rang. Mata's number. I was just thinking about you, he said, smiling. Still coming over tonight or? The sound that came through wasn't Mata's voice. It was breathing. Wet, labored, desperate. Mata. Lee's smile died. Mata, talk to me. A male voice replaced the breathing. This is Officer Gordon, Seoul Metropolitan Police. There's been an incident involving. Lee didn't hear the rest. He was already moving, out of his office, shouting orders to his lieutenants, calling his personal surgeon, his driver, his entire network. The phone pressed to his ear as Gordon explained that Mata had been resisting arrest and reached for a weapon, and unfortunate but necessary force was applied. The words washed over Lee like white noise. All he heard was his wife is dying. Mata wasn't officially his wife. They hadn't made it there yet. But in every way that mattered, she was his and someone had just shot her. Where is she? Lee's voice was arctic. Seoul General Hospital. Lee hung up and called his head of security. I want the names of every officer who was on that street corner tonight. I want their addresses, their families, their favorite restaurants, their mistresses. I want to know what they eat for breakfast and where they were born. And I want it in the next 20 minutes. Yes, sir. The drive to Seoul General took 12 minutes. Lee's driver ran every red light, escorted by 4 black SUVs that cleared traffic like they were carrying a head of state. Which, in this city, Lee essentially was. He walked into the air like a hurricane. 2 security guards tried to stop him. Lee's bodyguards removed them from his path with efficient violence. Where is Mata Park? His voice carried through the entire emergency department. A terrified nurse pointed. Trauma Bay 3, she's in surgery. Lee found the surgical waiting room and the glass window overlooking the operating theater. Mata was on the table. He could see blood, surgeons, controlled chaos. Her white scrubs gone, replaced with surgical drapes. Her face pale. Monitors beeping in rhythms Lee had learned to fear. His head of security appeared. Sir, we've identified the officers. 3 of them. Detective Gordon, Detective Hayes, and Detective Raymond Park. Where? Gordon's at the precinct filing his report. The others are. I want them. All 3. Tonight. Sir, they're police officers. This could. Lee turned and his expression made the man step back. They shot my wife. In my city. While she was walking home from saving lives. Do you think I care about consequences? No, sir. Do you think anyone, police, politicians, gods, will protect them from what I'm about to do? No, sir. Then get me those names and locations. And call Judge Kim. Tell him I need 3 arrest warrants signed within the hour for attempted murder. On what grounds? I don't care. Forge them if you have to. By morning, those 3 officers will be in cells I own or graves I dig. Their choice. Raymond Park sat in the precinct locker room with his head in his hands. Gordon's story was already filed. A textbook justified shooting. Mata Park had allegedly resisted arrest during a routine stop, allegedly reached for a weapon, allegedly posed a threat. All lies. And Raymond had been listed as a corroborating witness. You could? Hayes asked, closing his locker. Raymond looked up. We shot an unarmed nurse. Gordon shot a criminal's girlfriend who resisted arrest. You need to get your story straight, Park. The story's a lie. Hayes stepped closer, his voice dropping. Listen to me. You're 2 years out of the academy. You got a whole career ahead of you. You want to throw that away over one nurse? Gordon's protected. The captain's protected. The whole unit's protected. You start talking about what really happened, you're the only one going down. Raymond wanted to argue. Wanted to be the kind of cop who did the right thing regardless of consequences. But he was also scared. Scared of losing his badge, his career, his life. The precinct lights went out. All of them. Simultaneously. The entire building dropped into darkness except for emergency lighting that cast everything in blood red. What the? Hayes started. Then the doors burst open and men in black tactical gear flooded in. Not police. Not military. Something else. They moved with terrifying precision, securing every exit, every hallway, every potential escape route. Raymond reached for his service weapon. Someone grabbed his wrist from behind, a grip like iron, and pressed a gun to his temple. Don't, a voice said in Korean. We're not here for you. The lights came back on, revealing a scene from a nightmare. Every officer in the precinct was on their knees, hands on heads, surrounded by armed men who'd appeared from nowhere. In the center of it all, walking through the chaos like he owned it, was Lee White. He wore the same charcoal suit Raymond had seen in surveillance photos. The same impeccable appearance. But his eyes were empty of everything except purpose. Lee stopped in front of Gordon, who was on his knees in the middle of the bullpen. You shot my wife, Lee said quietly. Gordon's jaw clenched. That's not. Lee moved so fast Raymond almost missed it. He grabbed Gordon by the throat and lifted him, slamming him against a desk hard enough to crack the wood. You shot my wife. Each word punctuated with pressure. On a public street. While she was walking home from a hospital where she saves lives. Do you understand what you've done? She's going to live, Gordon choked out. Your connections got her the best. She's going to live because she's stronger than you deserve. But you. Lee released him, let him collapse. You're going to wish I'd killed you clean. He turned to his men. Take Gordon, Hayes, and Park. The warehouse. Raymond felt hands grab him. Wait, I didn't shoot anyone, I tried to stop. Lee's eyes found him. You were there. You're coming. Please, I'll testify. I'll tell the truth about what happened. You'll do that anyway, Lee said. After you understand exactly what happens to people who hurt what's mine. They were dragged out of the precinct as other officers watched in paralyzed silence. No one called for backup. No one drew weapons. They all understood the same truth. Lee White was untouchable, and anyone who'd harmed Mata Park had just signed their death warrant. The warehouse was somewhere in the industrial district. Raymond lost track during the drive. They were thrown into a large empty space lit by a single hanging bulb. Gordon, Hayes, and Raymond. 3 cops who'd made the worst mistake of their lives. Lee White stood by a metal table covered with tools Raymond tried not to identify. "I want to be very clear about something," Lee said, his voice echoing. "Mata is alive. If she weren't, you'd already be dead. But she's in pain. She's traumatized. She'll have nightmares. She'll flinch at sudden sounds. She'll carry scars, physical and psychological, for the rest of her life. Because of you." "We're police officers," Gordon said. "You can't." "I can." Lee picked up a knife from the table. "Do you know what I built? What my empire actually is? I control the supply chains that feed this city. The shipping routes. The customs officials. The politicians. The judges. I am the invisible infrastructure that keeps Seoul running. And you thought you could hurt my wife and face no consequences." He approached Gordon. "You shot her because you wanted to send me a message. So let me send you one." What happened next, Raymond would never speak about. Even years later. Even in therapy. Some things were too dark to articulate. Lee White didn't kill Gordon. That would have been mercy. Instead, he systematically destroyed the man's life. His career. His reputation. His family. His future. Hayes broke first, screaming for mercy, confessing everything. Lee listened with the patience of a man who already knew every word. Raymond was different. When Lee finally approached him, Raymond didn't beg. "I tried to stop him," Raymond said quietly. "I requested reassignment. I argued against the plan. But I was there. I'm guilty." Lee studied him. "You're guilty of cowardice, not malice. That's different. Not to her. Not to Mata." Lee nodded slowly. "You're right. Which is why you're going to do something for me. Anything. You're going to testify. Everything you saw. Everything Gordon did. Everything the department tried to cover up. You're going to burn the entire corrupt precinct to the ground." "They'll kill me." "No," Lee said. "They won't. As I own this city now. Every politician, every judge, every captain who looked the other way. By morning, Gordon's unit will be under federal investigation. By next week, half the department will be facing charges. And you're going to be the star witness who makes it happen." Raymond nodded. He'd lost his career, but maybe he could save his soul. Mata woke 3 days later in a private hospital room that looked more like a luxury hotel. Lee was there, sitting in a chair by her bed, his hand holding hers. He looked like he hadn't slept in 72 hours. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey." His voice cracked. "How do you feel?" "Like I got shot." Lee laughed. A broken, relieved sound. "You did. But you're going to be fine. The doctors said." "I know what doctors say. I am one." Mata tried to sit up, winced. "What did you do, Lee?" "What I had to." "Did you kill them?" "No." He met her eyes. "But they'll wish I had." Gordon and Hayes are facing federal charges for corruption, attempted murder, evidence tampering, and about 15 other crimes. Raymond Park's testimony is going to dismantle the entire precinct. And the police commissioner just announced his resignation. "You destroyed the police department." "I destroyed the corrupt parts of it. The parts that thought they could hurt you and walk away." Mata was quiet for a long time. Then, "I should leave. Seoul, Korea. This life is too dangerous." "Probably." Lee didn't argue. "But will you?" "No." She squeezed his hand. Because I love you. And because I'm tired of running from things that scare me. I scare you. Terrify me. But in a good way. Lee kissed her hand. Marry me. We've known each other 6 months. Marry me anyway. You're insane. Marry me. Mata smiled. Actually smiled despite the pain, despite the trauma, despite everything. Yes. They married in the hospital chapel 3 weeks later. Mata still had bandages under her white dress. Lee still had shadows under his eyes. The ceremony was small. Just them, a judge Lee owned, and 2 witnesses Lee trusted. I promise to protect you, Lee said during his vows. From everyone. Including myself when necessary. I promise to stay, Mata replied. Even when it gets scary. Even when it hurts. Even when you're being impossible. I'm always impossible. I know. 6 months after that, Mata discovered she was pregnant. Lee received the news like a general preparing for war. Immediately upgrading security, hiring bodyguards, installing panic rooms, buying a fortress disguised as a home. Our child, he said, his hand on Mata's still flat stomach, will be the most protected person in Korea. No one will ever make them afraid. No one will ever hurt them. No one will even think about threatening them without understanding the consequences. Mata covered his hand with hers. Or maybe we just raise them to be strong. Like their parents. Strong and protected. Deal. They stood together in their penthouse looking out over Seoul. A city that had nearly killed Mata, that Lee had nearly burned down in response, that now belonged to them in ways both beautiful and terrible. Do you regret it? Lee asked. Leaving Detroit? Coming here? Choosing this life? Mata thought about the nurse she'd been, broken, running, hollow. She thought about the woman she'd become, scarred, fearless, loved. Not for a second. Below them, the city lights glittered like promises. Above them, the stars watched like witnesses. And between them, a child grew, the son or daughter of a Detroit nurse and a Korean crime boss, who would inherit both mercy and vengeance. Both healing hands and an empire built on blood. Their story had started with violence. It had survived worse. And it would end, whenever it ended, with love. 5 years later, Mata stands in the trauma bay at Seocho Medical, now the most advanced hospital in Seoul, funded by Lee Enterprises. She's training a new class of nurses, teaching them what Detroit taught her. That every life matters, that compassion is strength, that sometimes saving one person changes everything. Her daughter, 3-year-old Minho, sits in Lee's office upstairs, drawing pictures while her father conducts business. She has Mata's eyes and Lee's stubborn chin. She speaks 3 languages. She knows her mother saves lives and her father protects them. She doesn't know yet that she's untouchable, that an army of shadows watches her every move, that her father would burn continents for her safety, that her mother once took a bullet and survived to build this life. She just knows she's loved. And in a city that nearly destroyed them, that's everything. Mata glances at the scar on her shoulder, a reminder of the night she stopped running and started fighting. Lee catches her eye through the glass partition separating their worlds and mouths 3 words. I love you. She mouths them back. Because some love stories start with roses and dinner. And some start with bullets and blood and a man who would dismantle empires to keep his wife safe. Both kinds are real. Both kinds survive.